It began with a wrong turn. My best friend Jake and I were driving back to Ohio after a music festival in Colorado, exhausted but buzzing from 3 days of neon-lit chaos. Around 2 a.m., Jake's GPS rerouted us off I-70 during Virtue. "Construction ahead," the monotone voice insisted, plotting a detour down a road labeled County Route 13. Neither of us questioned it, until the asphalt dissolved into gravel halfway through the forest. The woods here felt wrong. The pines stood too close to the road, their trunks skeletal and blackened, as if a wildfire had charred them decades ago. No owls, no crickets, just the creak of branches and a wind we couldn't feel. Jake white-knuckled the steering wheel, his phone's map glitching between static and a blank grid. "This isn't right," he muttered. We tried turning back, but every side road coiled like a snake, spitting us back onto Route 13. Then we saw the sign. "Welcome to Fallows Hollow. Pop 47. Fallows Hollow didn't exist. I Googled it, 0 results. Jake laughed nervously. Maybe it's one of those towns that got wiped off the map, flood or cult stuff. The headlights flickered as we rolled into the town at dusk. It looked frozen in the 1,930 wooden storefronts with hand-painted signs, a single gas pump rusted to sepia, and a diner with a flickering neon "open" sign. The air smelled like wet soil and gasoline. Jake parked crookedly. "We're asking for directions." Period. Inside the diner, an old man in a grease-stained apron wiped the counter with a rag that left smears. A jukebox in the corner played static. "Where you boys headed?" he asked, not looking up. Jake forced a smile. "Back to the highway, got lost." The man's hands stilled. "Ain't no one leaves once the fog rolls in." Outside, tendrils of gray fog slithered down the street, swallowing the buildings whole. The jukebox died mid-strack. The old man slid a brass key across the counter. "Room's upstairs, $13. Don't answer the door if it knocks." Jake tossed a crumpled bill at him. "We'll sleep in the car." The fog was waist-high by the time we sprinted to the car, icy and dense as wet wool. Jake fumbled with the keys. "Start, you piece of—" "Clara, Coquitch," began the old man. He peeled out, but the fog pursued, clawing at the windows. In the rearview mirror, shadows moved. Tall, hunched, their strides unnaturally long. We drove for hours. The gas gauge plummeted. Jake's phone showed 3:13 a.m. on a cracked screen, frozen. The road looped endlessly, the same bent oak, the same decaying barn. Then the headlights caught a figure, a woman in a tattered floral dress, barefoot, standing in the road. Jake slammed the brakes. "You see her too, right?" She turned slowly. Her face was a blur until the light hit it. Hollow eyes, a mouth stretched too wide, like a scream fossilized in flesh. She raised a hand, pointing past us. I turned. The fog had parted. A dozen figures stood in the road behind us, their silhouettes identical to hers. "Drive!" I screamed. Jake floored it. The car lurched as we struck the woman, but she shattered like glass. Shards embedding in the windshield. The road vanished. We were airborne, then crashing into a ditch. When I woke, dawn bled through the trees. Jake was slumped over the wheel, blood trickling from his temple. The fog was gone. On the dashboard lay a Polaroid we didn't take, a grainy image of us asleep in a dusty upstairs room, the old man standing over the bed with a knife. On the back, scrawled in red, "You should have stayed." The cops found us 3 hours later. "You're lucky," one said. "This logging road's been abandoned for years. No diner, no town. But when the tow truck hauled our car away, the mechanic found something, a shard of floral fabric lodged in the grill. Weird," he said. "Looks old, like Depression era." Jake quit his job. He texts me photos now. Blurry shots of bent street signs, fog pooling in his backyard. Last week, he sent a picture of the "Welcome to Fallows Hollow" sign. "Took this on my way to work," he wrote. "In Columbus." I tried to rationalize it. Sleep deprivation, carbon monoxide poisoning. But then I started noticing things. Static whispering through my radio at 3:13 a.m. Shadows in my periphery that walked with a limp. One night I dreamt of the diner. The old man stood behind the counter, polishing that same glass. "You'll be back," he said. "They always come back." When I woke, my hands reeked of gasoline. I drove to Jake's apartment. His door was unlocked. Inside, the walls were plastered with maps, red yarn connecting Fallows Hollow to towns that used to exist, places erased by floods, fires, or worse. On his desk, a Polaroid of me sleeping, the old man's hand on my shoulder. Jake emerged from the bathroom, eyes bloodshot. "It's not a place," he whispered. "It's a thing, and it's hungry." We returned to County Route 13 last month. The road was gone, replaced by a hiking trail, but as we walked, the air thickened, birds fell silent, and there, between two pines, stood the welcome sign. Jake stepped toward it. "Don't," I begged. He smiled, the same too wide a grin as the woman in the road. "I have to know." The fog swallowed him whole. I waited for hours, days. The police called it a suicide. But last night my doorbell rang. On the porch lay a Polaroid. Jake sitting at the diner counter, the old man beside him, both smiling. Behind them, fog pressed against the windows. Now I hear footsteps in the hallway, slow, limping, and the static on my radio won't stop. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see the diner's neon sign. Open. Always open. The weather app said it would be the worst winter storm to hit Texas in decades. But I had to make this drive. Mom was dying, and the doctors gave her less than 48 hours. I couldn't wait for the roads to clear, not when Dallas was 6 hours away. The rational part of my brain screamed to stay put in Austin, but I couldn't bear the thought of her passing alone. My hands trembled as I scraped ice off my windshield at 3 a.m. The parking lot was dead silent, that peculiar silence that only comes with heavy snowfall. I'd lived in Texas my whole life and never seen anything like this, the white blanket transforming the familiar landscape into something alien and hostile. The first hour on I-35 wasn't too bad. My old Honda Civic handled the icy patches well enough, and the road was empty save for a few brave truckers. The radio kept crackling with emergency broadcasts about road closures and stranded motorists, but I tuned them out. I had to keep going. Then the snow started again. Not the light, peaceful kind, but sideways sheets that reduced visibility to mere feet. The wind howled against my car like something alive, something. My headlights caught glimpses of abandoned vehicles, half buried in snowdrifts, their windows dark and accusing. I wondered if their occupants had made it to safety, or if they were still out there somewhere in the white wasteland. The engine light came on somewhere past Waco. "No, no, no," I muttered, but the car's stuttering grew worse. Steam started billowing from under the hood, and I knew I was in trouble. After 5 minutes, gravity fell upon me. I fell down into the waves. But the poison got me. The temperature gauge was pegged in the red. I managed to coast on to what I thought was the shoulder, but in the whiteout conditions, I couldn't even see the road anymore. My phone showed 1 bar of service, barely enough to load a map. The nearest town was 15 miles away. The GPS kept rerouting, unable to find a clear path through the closed roads. The temperature inside the car was dropping rapidly. I could see my breath now. I tried calling 911, but the call wouldn't go through. That's when I saw the lights in my rearview mirror. Relief flooded through me as they grew closer. It looked like an old pickup truck, moving slowly through the storm. I stepped out, waving my arms, but the truck crawled past without stopping. In the swirling snow, I caught a glimpse of the driver, or rather, the empty space where a driver should have been. My blood ran cold as I watched those red taillights disappear into the whiteness, then reappear further ahead as if waiting. They flickered once, twice, like a beckoning finger. I lasted another 30 minutes in the car before the cold became unbearable. The temperature had dropped to single digits, unheard of in Texas. My fingers were numb and my thoughts were getting fuzzy. I knew the signs of hypothermia well enough to recognize them in myself. Those taillights had appeared and disappeared 3 more times, always the same distance away, always waiting. In my increasing desperation, they started to look more inviting than threatening. Maybe I'd imagined the empty driver's seat. Maybe it was help, after all. I grabbed my phone and small emergency kit, wrapped my coat tighter, and started walking. The wind cut through my clothes like razor blades, and the snow was knee-deep in places. Those red lights guided me forward, always just ahead, just around the next bend. Sometimes I thought I heard an engine idling, but when I stopped to listen, there was only the wind. The worst part was the voices, carried on the wind or maybe in my head. They whispered about others who had followed those lights, about how the storm wasn't natural, about how some things in Texas were older than the roads, older than the state itself. I don't know how long I walked. Time lost meaning in that white void. My phone died, and with it went my last connection to the real world. The lights led me off the highway, down smaller roads I didn't recognize. I followed blindly, no longer able to feel my feet. Then I saw it, a gas station emerging from the snow like a mirage. The lights were on inside, and I could make out figures moving behind the frosted windows. The barn was busy. The air was smoky, not like I had ever known it. The crowd spread out, and the pickup truck was parked out front, covered in a thick layer of ice, as if it had been there for days. When I stumbled through the door, the old man behind the counter didn't seem surprised to see me. "You followed the lights," he said. It wasn't a question. The store was filled with people, dozens of them, all with that same lost look in their eyes. Some had been there for hours, some for days. "The lights lead the freezing to shelter," the old man explained, pouring me hot coffee with shaking hands. "Been happening every bad winter since the 50 cest. Some say it's the ghost of a trucker who froze to death out here, still trying to save others. Some say it's something older, something that feeds on the gratitude of the saved." I never made it to Dallas. Mom held on for 5 more days, long enough for the roads to clear and for my brother to make it there. Sometimes I wonder if the lights knew that, if they saved me from a futile journey that would have ended with me as another statistic in the storm. But on cold nights, when the wind howls just right, I still see those taillights in my dreams. And I wonder about all the others out there, following strange lights through the snow, and what really waits at the end of their journey. The road trip was supposed to save us. After the miscarriage, Sarah stopped talking. She'd sit by the nursery window, staring at the empty crib, her hands trembling like she was still cradling air. The doctor said a change of scenery might help. "Go somewhere wild," he urged. "Reconnect." So I packed our Jeep with camping gear, loaded our husky Coda into the back seat, and plotted a route through Nevada's Basin and Range, 1,000 miles of desert, mountains, and ghost towns. No people, no memories, just open road. The trouble started near Tonopah. Sarah wanted to avoid highways, so I turned onto a gravel pass labeled County Road 999. The map showed it cutting straight through the Toyabe Mountains, but after an hour the road began to writhe. It split into forks that hadn't existed moments before. The GPS glitched, repeating, recalculating, until its screen cracked. Sarah finally spoke. "We're going in circles." She pointed to a dead juniper we'd passed 3 times. Its branches twisted into a skeletal hand. Dusk fell, painting the desert in bruised purples. We crested a hill and saw a town, glowing faintly in the valley below. "Silver Bend, Pop. 89, read a sun-bleached sign. No such town was on the map. "We're camping here," Sarah said, her voice hollow. "I can't drive anymore." Silver Bend was a time capsule. Wooden storefronts with swinging saloon doors, a clapboard church, its steeple crooked, and a diner, its neon sign buzzing open in flickering crimson. The only car was a rusted Cadillac with 1,963 plates. Inside the diner, a waitress with a beehive hairdo and hollow cheeks slapped 2 menus on the counter. "Kitchen's closed," she said, "but the motel's got vacancies. Room 9's real cozy." The motel was a row of sagging cabins. Room 9 smelled of mildew and sage. Sarah collapsed onto the bed while I walked Coda. Outside, the desert was too quiet. No coyotes, no wind, just the faint hum of power lines. Coda froze, growling at the church. Its doors swung open, revealing shadows that slithered like oil. Then a voice hissed from the dark. "You shouldn't have stopped here." A man emerged, gaunt, his jeans caked with dust, a sheriff's badge glinting on his vest. "Name's Eli," he said, lighting a cigarette. "You got kids?" "No," I lied. He smirked. "This town, it's hungry, always has been. You'll want to leave before midnight." "Why?" "The offering." He dropped his cigarette, grinding it into the dirt. "It's why we're all still here." Sarah was asleep when I returned. Coda paced, whining. The bedside clock read 11:47 p.m. Then the screams began. Not human, animal, shrieking, guttural. I peered outside. Townsfolk shuffled toward the church, their faces slack. A woman dragged a goat by its horns. Its cries curdled the air. Sarah stirred. "What's happening?" "Stay here." I grabbed my flashlight and followed. The church's pews were packed. Eli stood at the pulpit, a rusty saw in hand. The goat thrashed on the altar, its eyes rolling. "Tonight," Eli boomed, "we feed the road." The crowd chanted, "Blood for the black top, bone for the dead." Eli sawed the goat's throat. Blood gushed into a copper basin. The floorboards rattled. Outside, a low groan reverberated like the desert itself was breathing. I ran back to the motel. Sarah was gone. Coda barked wildly at the bathroom door. Inside, Sarah stood in a clawfoot tub, her back to me. "Sarah, we need to..." She turned. Her eyes were pitch black, her smile slicing ear to ear. "It promised me a child," she croaked. "All I have to do is stay!" I lunged, pinning her as she thrashed. Coda's barks turned to snarls. Outside, the groan intensified. Headlights flooded the room. A semi-truck idled in the lot, its engine growling. No driver. The cab's door creaked open. "Get in!" shouted a voice. Behind the wheel was Eli. "Drive or die." We sped into the desert, Sarah convulsing in the back seat. Eli's knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Should have warned you better. The road, it's alive, feeds on grief. Your wife's ripe as hell." "How do we stop it?" "You don't. You outrun it." The headlights illuminated something ahead, a wall of darkness churning like a sandstorm. "The offering's not complete," Eli muttered. "It's pissed." The storm surged. The truck fishtailed. Eli swore. "Take the wheel!" He climbed into the bed, shouting into the wind. "Take me instead! I'm the last one!" A tendril of shadow lashed the truck. Eli screamed. Then silence. The storm vanished. Eli was gone. Sarah woke at dawn, her eyes human again. She didn't remember the church, the goat, or the storm. Where's Coda? The husky was gone. So was Silverbend. We stood on an empty highway, the Jeep parked nearby. We drove for hours, numb. At a gas station, I Googled Silverbend NV. But in my pocket, I found Eli's sheriff badge crusted with blood. Sarah's morning sickness returned. She swore she felt kicks. Doctors found nothing. Then the dream started. Eli kneeling in the desert, shadows burrowing into his chest. "It's got her," he whispered. "The baby's not yours." "It came," Kay laughed. "Last week, Sarah disappeared. I found her in the nursery clawing at the wallpaper. Behind it, a symbol etched into the plaster. A serpentine road coiled around a crying infant. "It's coming," she hissed. "The road always takes its due." We fled in the Jeep, Sarah clutching her swollen belly. By midnight, we were back in Nevada. The headlights flickered, the GPS died. County Road 9 reappeared. "No," I begged. "We can't." Sarah gripped the wheel. "It wants her. I have to go back." Silverbend materialized, the church lit by hellish red light. Townsfolk surrounded the jeep, their eyes black, mouths sewn shut. Sarah staggered to the altar. The basin overflowed with blood. "Take me," she screamed. "Let her live." The ground split. A massive thing erupted. A tangle of asphalt, bone, and tar, its maw lined with shattered headlights.
The fuck of it all, yeah. He's animated with it's Sarah.
Sarah holding a swaddled infant in the church. Eli stood beside her, whole and smiling, an empty pole transformer with red and red marking. The council call. And she connected to all the porch, her fur matted with oil. Council, Delwyn Trend, in the church. Eli stood beside him. On the back, the road provides. Coda won't stop growling at the nursery, and the walls, they're bleeding asphalt. The tires hummed against the cracked Texas highway like a funeral dirge. My best friend Jess drummed her fingers on the steering wheel of her '98 Chevy, squinting at the dust-blurred horizon. "You sure this shortcut was a good idea, Mia?" she muttered. The map on my phone had flatlined an hour ago, leaving us stranded in a labyrinth of sun-scorched backroads. We'd been driving to Marfa for the art festival, lured by neon desert installations and Instagram hype. But the scenic route Jess insisted on taking had dissolved into a wasteland of dead grass and skeletal oil rigs. The Chevy's AC wheezed like a dying animal, and the silence between us thickened. Then the engine sputtered. Jess cursed, white-knuckling the wheel as the car lurched to a stop. Smoke coiled from the hood. We sat there, swallowed by the deafening void of nothingness. No cars, no cell signal, just the sun, leering like a drunk god. "We walk," Jess said, slamming the door. 2 miles later, we stumbled onto a ghost town. A crooked sign read, "Welcome to Perdition's Well, Pop." 1202 was now packed. The buildings sagged like rotten teeth. A gas station with shattered pumps, a diner with windows boarded by plywood. Inside the diner, dust motes swam in the light. Faded menus still sat on tables, and a mural of a grinning cowboy covered the back wall. His eyes were hollowed out by bullet holes. "This place is wrong," Jess whispered. A shadow moved outside. A man stood in the street, gaunt and sun-leathered, wearing a Stetson tilted low. His flannel shirt hung open, revealing a scarred chest. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared. Jess grabbed my arm. "Let's go, now!" We ran. The pickup truck roared up behind us, kicking gravel. "Y'all need help?" The driver was a wiry man in his 60S, with a nicotine yellow smile. "Harlan," he said, "ranch hand. Ain't safe round here after dark." Relief made me stupid. We climbed in. Harlan's ranch was a graveyard of rusted tractors and animal bones. His guest house was a shack reeking of kerosene. "Storm's comin'," he said, nodding at bruised clouds. "Best stay put." Jess frowned at the taxidermy crow on the wall. Its glass eyes followed us. That night, I woke to whispers. Outside, Harlan stood in the yard, murmuring to the dark. A shape loomed behind him, tall, jagged, wrong. Like a man stretched into a tree. Harlan raised a hand and the thing vanished. "You saw that, right?" Jess hissed. Her face was pale. We packed quietly, but the truck keys were gone, so was Jess's pocket knife. Harlan found us at dawn, holding a coffee pot. "Leaving so soon?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Y'all ought to see the shed. Found something you'll like." The shed's padlock was new. Inside, Polaroids covered the walls. Strangers in cars, camping tents, a family posing at the Perdition's Well sign. All dated, all smiling. None of them looked alive. Jess screamed. A shadow slithered under the door. Harlan chuckled. They're hungry tonight. We ran. The storm hit hard, rain needling our skin. Harlan's shouts chased us into the desert. You can't outrun the... Well, Jess tripped over a half-buried sign. Danger. Abandoned mine shaft. The ground crumbled beneath her. She fell. The hole gaped like a throat. Jess clung to the edge, legs dangling over blackness. Mia, pull me up. I grabbed her wrists. Something moved below her, a wet clicking sound. Fingers, bone white and too long, clawed at her ankles. Don't let go, she screamed. The fingers twisted. Jess's legs snapped. She dropped. Her scream echoed forever. Harlan appeared, shotgun aimed at my chest. Should have stayed in the shed. He marched me to Perdition's Well, the real one. A stone pit in the town center. The muraled cowboy's bullet-hole eyes glowed red. They've been here since the Comanche, Harlan said, binding my hands. Old gods, hungry gods. They bless this land. If you feed 'em. The well groaned. A stench of rot and copper wafted up. Shapes writhed in the dark. Harlan raised his knife. Your turn. I headbutted him. He staggered, knife skidding into the well. The ground trembled. Harlan's eyes widened as the thing from the mine shaft oozed over the stones. A tangle of sinew and antlers, its mouth a jagged hole. It lunged. Harlan's screams were cut short. I ran. The pickup's keys dangled from the shed door. The engine roared to life as the creature dragged Harlan's corpse into the well. But it wasn't over. In the rearview mirror, the cowboy mural bled black oil. The thing stood in the road, antlers scraping the sky. It pointed at me. You're marked. I drove until the sun rose. The cops called me hysterical. No bodies, no Perdition's Well on any map. Jess's mom sobbed on the news. My girl wouldn't just vanish. Last night I found a Polaroid on my porch. Jess, alive but not. Her eyes are hollow. Behind her, the well yawns. And the thing with the antlers? It's in the background, smiling.